Hello, welcome to Tuesday's Record Sport Hotline Live. My name is Daniel Caw. As ever, I am joined by the Robin to my Batman, Keith Jackson.
I'm the Robin to your Batman. Aye, all right, John Terry.
Thought you'd like that one.
We John Terry.
We're also joined by Record Sports transfer guru, Scott Burns. Burnsy, how's it going?
It's good. I thought it was going to be introduced.
You can be Catwoman if you like.
Burnsy's fault. This is a bad start. I tell you one thing, Daniel, you should be wearing a mask.
Why is that?
Robin are living in here.
Listen, guys, let's entertain the masses. Enough about us. The best place for us to start, I believe, as usual, as it has been recently, is Rangers, Keith. I understand we have some breaking news regarding Andrew Kavanagh.
Yeah, a story which Record Sport is breaking online. The information coming into us, and we'll check this with Burnsy because Burnsy's always the go-to man. But the information coming in to the office tonight appears to suggest that Andrew Kavanagh might be on his way across the pond. That he has happily allowed Greta Steinson and Kevin Thelwell to run the interview process up until this point, and now we think it's entered in the final phase of discussions. I think the words seems to be that Andrew Kavanagh wants to put himself in the room. He wants to be there. He wants to look at the candidates in the eyes before a final decision is taken. And obviously, it's no real surprise if Andrew Kavanagh is putting his name, and he's the front man for this whole takeover. This is his baby. So it would be surprising if, you know, that he wasn't deferred to for the final decision. And in order to do that, I think he wants to be in the room. Burnsy, does that chime with anything that you've been picking up?
Yep, it certainly does. It seems to be that the potential new owner wants to have a very much a hands-on approach from the club from top to bottom. I think that was pretty evident in the first meetings when he first came up to Ibrox, and obviously at that point you had Patrick Stewart and the obviously incoming Kevin Thelwell, but it was always that Andrew Kavanagh always wanted to be involved in it, and I don't think, even though he's going to be at the top of the tree, he's going to be a silent partner. I think that he's going to be very much going to be hands-on. And this is going to be obviously a major appointment for the club, and I think he just wants to make sure that it's the right one for the club moving forward. And the interviews are taking place with Patrick Stewart, Greta, as you said, and Kevin Thelwell. But I'm not, as far as I'm aware, I don't think that the chairman has met any of them in person so far. So I believe that could be the next stage, and that's probably causing the delay to the current appointment.
I think Burnsy, is Greta Steinson and Thelwell that have been overseeing the process. I'm not sure that Patrick Stewart has been personally involved in it either. I think it's been left to these two guys, and that's an interesting thing because actually neither of them have had the boots on the ground yet. You know, neither of them are actually officially on the Rangers payroll, but I think they've been entrusted with getting it to this stage. And it does make sense if Andrew Kavanagh, you know, decides to have the final say on it because it's about to become his baby. And all three men, at the end of the day, will have to be answerable to it, and they'll need to take ownership of it. If it goes whatever way they go, if it's a spectacular success, the three of them will deserve all the credit for it. And if it doesn't go so well, then the three of them will be in the firing line for it. Not suggesting that people are going to, you know, be overthrown at this early stage in the thing, but it's just a question of judgment. They've got some big decisions to make, none more so than who fronts it up as manager. They have to be as sure as damn it that they're getting it right. So in that regard, and this, you know, I've said over and over, I wrote a piece today, Daniel, you can't forget about one thing you can't dismiss about Andrew Kavanagh is that he's made his fortunes in business from health insurance. He's effectively gone through his entire life being risk adverse, because that's the job, and he has to calculate what looks like an unnecessary risk, what looks like a decent bet. So yeah, it surprises me not in the slightest that he would want to get involved at this point. Perhaps just a little surprised that it's taken him this long to get personally involved in the process. But if he's got guys that he trusts to get to this point, then maybe it makes sense. But either way, I think it's reached the point now where it doesn't surprise me if he does appear, whether that's in Glasgow or somewhere in Europe over the next couple of days, because as we keep stressing, Rangers don't have a lot of time to mess around now. They've got to the point where they need to get something done. It's interesting, and I think all roads kind of point to Davide Ancelotti, because as we said last night on the show, before Don Carlo was unveiled to the Brazilian press in Rio, it was going to be fascinating to see who was part of his backroom team. Was Davide Ancelotti on the plane? Was he in South America? And we got the answer to that. No, he wasn't. And we got a little bit more than that when Carlo Ancelotti said that he's in talks with a European club. Some people are seeing that as an indication it's not Rangers, because why wouldn't he say a British club? I'm not personally buying that. The kind of PR machine around the Ancelotti family had Davide basically, signing a 3-year contract a couple of weeks ago at Rangers. They were that certain, and it was out there, and it was put out there for a very good reason, I'm sure. And the only other club that he was being linked at that time was Como in Italy. There haven't been any other links put out there by anybody's PR machine to suggest that anybody else has come to the table where Davide Ancelotti is concerned. So that would make you think and consider that it's Rangers. When his dad was talking about speaking to a club, it's Rangers. And then later on this afternoon, an Instagram post was put out, I think, by Davide Ancelotti's wife, which shows the family currently enjoying a sunshine break in a pool. One can only assume somewhere in Europe, given that he hasn't joined his dad's travelling party. And if, again, just fits in with the timeline, if people are waiting now on Andrew Kavanagh to get this side of the pond, then it makes sense why the Ancelotti family are enjoying a day or a couple of days in a nice villa someplace just to relax. Because one of the things you would have thought is, well, if he wasn't joining his dad, why didn't he get in a plane? Why isn't he here already? And it might well be that the process isn't quite concluded, and that he needs to wait for his moment in front of Andrew Kavanagh. Certainly all seems to make sense, but we've been round the houses on this sort of process for a number of weeks now, and not a great deal of it has made sense, Daniel. We've disappeared down a couple of rabbit holes along the way, but it does feel now, surely, that we're on to the final stretch.
Well, that comment I've put up there, Keith, might shed some light on things. Apparently that photo, the Ancelotti family, is actually the time capsule in Coat Bridge. So that would
make sense. That figures.
That would make sense. So more as we get it on that.
Well, let's get somebody down to Guidi's in Coat Bridge, just in case that's where the big meeting, the big round table's taking place.
That would make sense. We'll get on that more as we get it. Look, a lot of people commenting, surely it'll be announced this week. It's dragging on. The one thing that I would say, just listening to you guys talk, Keith, is surely this must mean a formal takeover announcement is just round the corner if Andrew Kavanagh is this involved in appointing the new manager.
Yeah, but I mean, that's not going to come as any surprise, or it certainly shouldn't come as any surprise to anybody who's been watching this show. Why it's taking so long, Daniel, God only knows. I think there has been a frustration with people inside the deal who are looking to sell shares, that it's taken quite as long as it has done, even though it was a very complex deal from the outset. I think there is a feeling that there's been an extra layer of caution applied, whether that's by lawyers, who knows. It has taken longer than was originally part of the schedule, that's for sure. And I think Dave King suggested it was going to be mid-June before it completes. I think that I'm not sure that I'm backing that. I think it'll be done sooner than that. And yes, again, all roads point to, a new ownership structure being officially signed off and put in position, as well as a new manager. And, you know, Thirlwell is still at Everton, isn't he? He's not really officially on the books yet. So all these things look as if they might fall into place at round about the same time. But it still leaves Rangers with so much work to do between now and the start of the new campaign.
We'll get plenty of comments coming in. If you want to get involved in the conversation, please hit us up in the comment section below. Before we move on, that's young people slang, you know what I mean?
About 20 years ago.
Whatever you say, Daddy-o. Right, some of the comments coming in. Let me throw these at you before we move on from Rangers.
Anyway, what's the comments here?
Gaza B says, it's unreal. The simple fact Ancelotti has never been a manager or won anything hasn't been questioned a lot more in the media as a joke. Massive job. Wasted season again. Incoming. Marzuno says, big job for a 35-year-old with no experience. One slip up at a press conference in Scotland could have him permanently labelled a clown.
Well, I think it's what happens on the pitch that's more important than in the press conference. You know, and we have seen managers who struggle to deal with the intensity and the media side of it and the glare that's constantly placed upon them. And I agree with all of that. I agree with every word. I do think that ultimately it's what happens on the pitch that where managers will be judged. What I would say is I've written this column today, and I'm trying to be generous. I'm looking at this and going, there is the potential here for this to be regarded over the course of time as actually a stroke of genius if it is Ancelotti Jr. It's a complete divergence from what you would expect. It's out the box thinking. It's fresh. It's contemporary. I'm sure it's exciting for the Rangers supporters. Tick, tick, tick in all of these boxes. You've got a major name in Ancelotti, albeit it's not the Don, it's the son of. I'm sure he's got a contacts book, which will be very similar to that of his old man's. And he has had this privileged education and upbringing of being around one of the greatest managers that European football's ever seen. And it's not too much of a stretch. I would certainly think the Rangers' position on this, if they did go down that road, it would be, you've got to hope, you've got to suspect that how is it possible to spend so much time around that sort of environment, those elite environments, and not pick it up, you know, not, you know, take a leaf out the old man's book, understand exactly how he did his man management, understand exactly the tactics that he employed. And if he's got all that, it does give him quite a good head start, doesn't it? And so you can see, I can see, I'm putting this forward as a reason why Rangers might think this is a good idea. I'm going to flip that as well and say, do you know what? As exciting, as fresh, as innovative, as visionary as this whole thing sounds, he's a 35-year-old man with no managerial experience. And that means if it goes wrong, then you're not going to be praised for coming up with something different. People are going to look at it and say, well, do you know, there was a very good reason why nobody else came up with that idea. It's not because you guys are geniuses. It's because it just wasn't a very good idea. Now, I'm sure with his background, Davide Ancelotti has to have a real chance of being a success as a manager. But you're throwing him into a bear pit, quite literally, by giving him that first shot in this environment, in this city. And that would be the concern. Because if it's not a stroke of genius, if it doesn't look as if you have just, you know, pulled one right out the hat, and this guy's a superstar, and Rangers are up and running right from the start of next season, which is going to be hard enough, by the way, given that they're so far behind the eight ball. But let's just say all these things fall into place. Yes, they will deserve enormous credit for having the foresight to go and make an appointment like this that nobody else would have made. If, however, it goes wrong, and if Brendan Rodgers is stretching out, getting an early lead at the top of the top flight table, if he wins his first Old Firm game, all these examples of where it might go wrong, I think the pressure that comes down on Ancelotti will be ferocious, but also it will rebound on the guys that were involved in the interview process, without a question of a doubt. And that's what makes it such an enormous risk. Yes, there might be a level of excitement around it. Yes, it could come up. It could work out perfectly. But if it doesn't, and you would have to say what a risk you're taking, and if it doesn't come off, if this guy isn't prepared for the intensity of it all, if he can't quite deal with it, of stepping out his dad's shadow and becoming a manager in his own right, then Rangers fans aren't going to have to look too far for the people to blame and hold accountable for that. So that's what's so fascinating about it.
Aye. And look, we've got plenty of comments coming in. I've obviously nudged towards the fact I think it's, like you, Keith, a massive gamble. But there's people, the Hoopsaholic here, saying, so if he's got no experience, he's got no experience of adversity then. We've got one as well, Dennis Mirren saying Arteta worked under Pep, Davide worked under Carlos, two of the most successful managers in Europe for years. So, look, Jim
I get all that. One thing I'll say, I'll let Burnsy have his say, but the Arteta thing, Arteta's done a great job at Arsenal. Where's the trophies?
Very good point. Ultimately,
that's what he's, if you want to be baby Pep or, son of Pep or the kind of, the next Pep Guardiola, you need to start putting some trophies in the cabinet.
Aye.
And as good a job as Arteta has done at Arsenal, there are now Arsenal fans questioning whether or not he should still be around, and complaining a little bit about the lack of silverware that he's managed to secure.
Aye. Look, other comments, Burnsy. I mean, this one, Craigie says he still thinks it'll be Stevie G. I had comments up earlier talking about Russell Martin. Do we now all think it is pointing towards Ancelotti?
I think my information is that Ancelotti's certainly in the mix, but my understanding is nobody has been offered the job. And I think Russell Martin's in the mix as well. And I don't know if there are any others. There could be 3, there could be 4, but all I know is that the job has not been offered to any individuals so far. And it's a case of taking it to the next step, isn't it? Of whatever Andrew Kavanagh decides he wants to go, if he meets them face to face, whether he meets 2, 3, 4, who knows? I'm not convinced by the Stevie G noise. I really am not, from what I've heard. Unless there's something changed in the last couple of days, I'm not convinced that Steven Gerrard coming back is a goer. But I could be wrong. But I said everyone I've spoken to said no, it's not going to happen. But going back to the point with the Davide Ancelotti, people are saying no experience, right? Well, Rangers have appointed experienced managers of late. Philip Clement, Giovanni Van Bronckhorst. They've not really worked out. Steven Gerrard was a rookie when he went in as well. We've made this point before. He hadn't been managed, so that was a success. So,
Walter Smith,
Walter had a great background under Jim McLean and obviously under Graham Souness as well. But these guys. The last man who won a title was an inexperienced manager. So why could Ancelotti not do the same? I know it's a big gamble.
I think Burnsy, it's a different time and place. Rangers are at a different time and place. They were still really recovering from the bruising experience of being put down the leagues, of having to come back up. They were finding their feet back in the Premier League. They were making a lot of mistakes along the way. And I think there was, because of Stevie G's sort of aura and his personality and what he'd achieved as a player, I think there was a willingness on the Rangers supporters who, having come through this procession of disappointments, I think they were prepared to show a level of patience to Steven Gerrard at that time when the club was struggling to find a sense of direction. I think they were happy to do that, Burnsy. And even then, some of them weren't happy because at the end of the day, there were moments throughout that period that Steven Gerrard was actually, coming under a lot of pressure because of his failure to win trophies. He had a shot at 9 trophies and he won only one of them, albeit it was the big one as far as the Rangers support were concerned. I'm not sure with the American takeover and this sort of air of bubbling excitement around Rangers and their supporters right now, that they are prepared to think, well, that's fine, we're going to get new owners and everything's going to change and it's the 49ers and it's going to be money to spend, it's going to be a revolutionary takeover. Are they prepared to sit and take 1 trophy out of 9 off the next manager? I'd say no. I think that whoever is put into this position, and I'm not sure that there would be American owners at this point fully understand it. And why should they? This is a mental environment in which we habitate. But I don't think they fully understand the pressure that's going to come down on them if this doesn't hit the ground running next season. And I wonder if they're speaking to the right people, getting the right advice on it. Because to me, the Rangers support are in a different place than they were back in 2018 when Gerrard came in. I think they will be putting a demand on the Americans and their next manager to make an instant impact, to do something which really shows them that Rangers are about to surge in the right direction, not take slow baby steps to get there.
Aye. I think the name's the equation for the Rangers job. I don't think they're names that have come in blind. I think they've come across paths of people previously, whether it be Kevin Thirlwell, Ancelotti for Everton, whether it be Russell Martin in Leeds United. I don't think any of these names have just been pulled out fresh. I think there's some background to them all. And that's why I think they're in the equation.
Well, look, our pal Gianni simply says he's seen Charlie Miller today at soft play. Seems to be Russell Martin as a done deal, according to him. So you can take that to the bank, lads. There you go. Get to the bookies right now. I'm conscious.
I hope Gianni had a nice time at soft play today.
Me too.
I hope we played nice with the kids and all that.
I hope he got down the shooting. That was good.
Yeah.
I'm conscious that we're going to hear from Record Sports Andy Newport a little bit later on, and my chat with him was all about Rangers. So should we maybe talk about Celtic?
Yeah, because I think Burnsy's got some interesting views on what's likely to happen in the transfer window. Burnsy, I know you were doing a bit of online guruing with your followers earlier on today. Tell me this: what was your headline kind of note on Celtic and what you expect to happen there over the summer? Because this feeds into a conversation we've been having for a couple of days, I think.
My follower was my mum, which used to win.
Is she asking about Celtic's transfer policy for?
No, it's more about my lunch. No, obviously Celtic. They're aware of what's happening at the other side of the city, and obviously there could be some massive changes, but they're more looking inside than outside. And obviously they failed to win the treble. They still had they won a double and made progress in the Champions League, but there are still substantial funds available for Brendan Rodgers to invest this summer, and for the right man, obviously he's looking at several positions. He's wanting a winger and a couple of midfielders in the first instance, and obviously there's money there to spend. And they showed last season with Arnie Engels coming in as a record signing, and I think, my understanding is if the right player is available, then they would be prepared to go above that price again this summer, sort of thing, for the right player. So obviously Celtic want to show ambition. They want to make further progress in the show. And as it stands, this is Brendan Rodgers' last season, unless he signs a new contract. So I think they'll be doing all they can to try and convince him to stick around for a bit longer. That means showing a bit of ambition.
Let me throw this. Sorry, Keith. Let me throw this comment at you. Jerry says the Matt O'Reilly, Frimpong and Kyogo sell-ons alone should be enough to fund at least one record-breaking buy this summer. I'm expecting at least 2 over the £11 million barrier. You look at the money Celtic have made this season, the Champions League, sales from last season. It's not that unreasonable, I would put forward.
It's not, but Burnsy, we've been having a chat over the last couple of days, and I've been saying I think it's going to be fascinating to see what route Celtic go down, what strategy they employ in the transfer market this summer. Is it a repeat of what Brendan Rodgers managed to sort of force them into, encourage them into 12 months ago, when he was saying push out the boat a little bit, spend a little bit more, I'll get your return. If you're brave enough, if you're prepared to just pay that little bit extra premium, I'll get you players in here that you'll make a lot of money from. I think that's how it was sold last summer. And I think, as we said the other day, he might have an issue in his hands if he was called into the boardroom to assess this season. If the board said to him, well, what do you think we'd realistically achieve if we put Adam Ida and Arnie Engels up for sale? Would we get our money back? And so that makes me wonder, and I've been speculating a little bit, it'll be interesting to see, do Celtic continue along that road, encouraged by Brendan Rodgers, Or do they say to Brendan Rodgers, listen, that hasn't worked for us. We prefer spreading the risk a little bit. You know, if we've got 15, 20 million to spend, we'd rather spend it in 4 or 5 than in 2, because that's been Celtic's model. But so I'm really interested in the information that you're picking up, because that suggests very strongly that Brendan Rodgers has won the argument, and they're going to back him again in the way that he wishes to be backed.
Well, they've been down the road of project players and some work for what everyone, maybe 5 or 6 don't work. And probably over the longer term, it probably ends up, the time you tally transfer fees, it probably costs as much, if not more, you know what I mean? But the big ones, the headline ones you get back in, always make money. Going back to Arnie Engels and Adam Eder, you're saying, would they get their money back? I think they probably would. And they might even get more, because it's not about, I mean, a lot of clubs, or I'm not looking at players as closely in terms of actually watching them. It's a lot down to the data and the stats, and their data is good and the stats are good, and a lot of players are picked up in that. So I don't think there'll be any issue in selling either of them for the same money or in excess of what they got. I know we looked at it and saying maybe they've not hit the heights of a £9 million striker or an £11 million playmaker, but I think the bigger picture is teams are led by data. And if our data is good, and these guys have also played in the Champions League, that adds a value as well. So they've played at the top level. And I don't think there'll be any issues in selling those 2 players you mentioned.
At a profit tomorrow.
A profit, yep.
Wow. Okay, let me hold on, Daniel.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Burnsy, there's one name that I think I can hear Celtic fans screaming at the laptop right now. When you talk about breaking through a record spend barrier on a potential target for this summer, is Kvistgaarden the guy that's in your mind?
I think he would want to be on there, but my information just now is that it's more likely to be Eintracht Frankfurt than Glasgow Celtic, but the door has not been closed, a deal has not been done. So
Celtic have the money to compete.
Celtic have the money to. If Celtic really wanted to do that deal, they could go and do it tomorrow, or when the transfer window opens, should I say? So it's all, you know, and I mean, obviously, I don't think. Well, I don't think the issue is really the transfer fees, is it? It's more the wages and keeping players within the structure. That's an issue, is it not?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because when you start buying 10 and 11 million pound players, you've got to pay them more, and then when you break the structure of more the actual spending of the transfer fee. If they get somebody for, like, say, 12 million, a striker, and he would still the same sort of money as Callum McGregor and that, I think they would do that tomorrow. I think it's more, the wage structure is more the issue.
Aye. If you sign a £10 million player, what's he going to be on? 50, 60 grand a week? You would have thought in the current market. I know, Burnsy, you said your information is that they are in position to go and potentially break their own record this summer. But what is your gut feeling, being around a lot of these clubs and all of these decision makers? I mean, do you think that will happen? Do you think it will be a big summer for Celtic?
I think it will be a big summer. And as one of the caller said earlier, I mean, they're going to pocket some decent money as well from sell-ons, and they've got to go again for the Champions League. So no, I do think there will be big headline signings this summer, I've got to say.
Yeah. Well, Burnsy, I know we've taken up far too much of your evening.
I told him, Daniel, we only needed 10 minutes, and here you are. You've kept the guy on for half an hour. He's probably starving.
Listen,
I better go off because my neighbours will be on the PlayStation and I'm using their Wi-Fi.
They've not found out you steal their Wi-Fi. That's pretty good. Burnsy, it's always a pleasure having you. It's always a pleasure having you on the Hotline Live. Thank you so much for joining us, Burnsy.
Cheers. All the best.
Cheers, Scott.
Thank you. One thing, Keith, before we move on from Celtic, actually, that I wanted to get your take on. A couple of comments here, if I can just find them. They're coming in so fast, I can't even keep up. Regarding Brendan Rodgers, Marzuno here says, we can't have next season being all about will he, won't he with Brendan. And I think that's a very good point. I mean, incoming transfers will want to know, look, am I playing for you long term? Are you going to be leaving? I would like to think that Celtic board will be on to Brendan now and saying, look, what's happening? Are you here for the long term?
I would imagine that conversations to that end will be taking place. Absolutely. I don't know if Brendan Rodgers feels the need to commit at this point. He said that when he signed, he wouldn't leave before his 3 years were up, unless Celtic invited him to leave. I certainly see the sense in this that you don't want it becoming a soap opera. You know, if Brendan Rodgers is steering Celtic to another really successful season, as I probably strongly suspect he will next season, it will become a real topic of conversation and perhaps an unwanted distraction. Probably from December, January time on. If Celtic are in a real good place and they've had another reasonably successful European campaign, they're making progress, and people start to fear, you know, what might happen if Brendan Rodgers doesn't commit. I think it probably becomes a real big talker round about then. I think that he's quite relaxed as things are right now. It wouldn't surprise me if there is a conversation going on. It also wouldn't surprise me if Celtic hope to try and convince him to put something on paper before the start of the season. But I think it's midway through next season. I think for a number of reasons. I think most notably, if it's not going particularly well for Celtic next season and we get to the turn of the year, I think it could become a difficult one for Brendan Rodgers. We've seen, just let's humour me for a second, to just say Rangers get it all spectacularly right. They managed to rebuild a squad in 0 time. Mm-hmm. They appoint, let's say, Davide Ancelotti, and the guy is an absolute genius. And not only are Rangers much improved, but they get ahead of Celtic. They win the first Old Firm game. And the pressure begins to mount on Celtic. And then Celtic don't enjoy the same sort of Champions League campaign that they did last. By the time it gets to December time, you've seen, and we've talked about this sort of, there is that element of entitlement around Celtic. They will not react well. Mm. So would Brendan Rodgers, would Celtic want to have binded themselves to an agreement? Or do you take a kind of longer term approach and say, let's see where we are 3-4 months into the new season. If we're sitting pretty, then let's get a contract, you know, on the table and signed. And if it's becoming a bit testy, and if patience is running out, and if some old sores are reopening, then maybe it's not a great idea for either party. So, but yes, I do agree with that. You don't want it becoming a soap opera. You don't want it becoming, you know, a weekly issue. But I think first and foremost, Celtic want to get the campaign up and running, and get a feel for how it's looking.
Do you think, Keith, that maybe Rodgers is looking to see how much is spent and what the ambition is this summer before he decides?
I think that'll be a big part of it. You just heard Burns saying it, you know, and I've been mentioning for a couple of these shows now. I'll be really interested. Has he still won his argument with the board? Are they prepared still to back his vision for how they should operate in the transfer market, or are they going to, you know, crack the whip a little bit and say, no, we're going our way. We're going back to a more traditional player trading model, because that would encourage Brendan Rodgers to maybe think that, you know, 3 years will be enough. If, on the other hand, he thinks he's getting fully backed, his vision has been backed, and the board are prepared to be, I think he would use the phrase, braver in the transfer market, then maybe he'll look at it and say, well, I can build a real legacy here. And we've mentioned before, Daniel, there's the possibility that he gets to next season, strong possibility he gets to next summer, and he's clocked up 5 in a row.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I think the idea, the notion will start to grow in his own head that he did walk away when he was on course, seemingly for 10 in a row. And that should have been a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And if you get to 5, all of a sudden, it's not a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It's just opened up again. And that will appeal to him. I'm sure it will. So I think there's a lot to be resolved, but I wonder if it's something that will kind of crystallise over the course of the campaign rather than be sorted in advance of it kicking off.
No.
Could be either way.
No, and I agree with everything you say there. I think it's a good point. I don't think either party fully knows what's going to happen yet. Before we finish though, Keith, I know we did have a bit of a Rangers chat with Burnsy, but I caught up with Record Sports' Andy Newport earlier on. He's a sort of unofficial Rangers correspondent. I thought it was best to get his take on the comings and goings with Davide Ancelotti, Russell Martin and everyone else. Should we hear what he had to say?
Let's do that, Daniel.
Let's hear what you have to
Andy,
say.
it's great as ever to have you on the Hotline Live. I don't even know where to start with this Rangers merry-go-round. I feel like every day now, people are on Instagram tracking flights. Last night, Davide Ancelotti didn't turn up with his dad in Brazil. That could be a sign, perhaps, that he's heading towards Glasgow.
I've just been sent an Instagram picture. He's on holiday. His missus posted on Instagram. So this is what we've been reduced to, ladies and gentlemen. Tracking friends and families' Instagram accounts. So yeah, it doesn't look like he'll be coming in today. He's still by the pool, all inclusive. If he's anything like me, he'll need to hit the gym for about a week afterwards as well. So maybe a wee while yet before we see the ball Dave pitch up in Scotland.
See the whole Ancelotti thing generally. I actually think it's so bizarre. Like, okay, he might be a very talented coach. We all know about the experiences he's had. But to me, anyway, I don't know if you agree, I just feel like Rangers is crying out for an experienced hand right now. A guy that's been there and done it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been saying from day one, it's a punt. Actually, I got a bit of stick online for writing a piece last week on this very subject when it looked at that point that he wouldn't be coming. Obviously, the story's moved on from then. Listen, I've said for day dot, this is a gamble. Listen, it might be one that pays off, and in which case then you have to absolutely, applaud Kevin Thelwell and Gunnar Steenson for their vision and be able to spot this guy. But listen, until he comes in and does it, no one knows. So yeah, it's a gamble. If it is to be him, then clearly the people coming in to take over Rangers have got strong convictions on that. They see something in him that convinces them that for all his lack of experience, he's got something that will allow him to come in and take on a job of this stature. Listen, okay, he's been following his dad's footsteps, but he has worked at some proper football clubs, so he knows what a big football club, what a big football operation looks like. But again, he's been there by his dad's side. He's not been the man calling the shots. So until we see him in that environment, and Madrid's a super high pressure place to work. There's no many more pressurised environments than that. But he's not the man in the firing line day in, day out. It's his dad, obviously. So, and coming to Glasgow is, listen, it's got its own peculiarities, as we all know. So whether or not how he copes with that is going to be intriguing if he is the man. But again, we're still waiting. I mean, it is a bit of a, circus, if you want to call it that. I mean, I don't think the club have been particularly great in terms of controlling the narrative in this one. There's certain candidates in there that perhaps should have been ruled out by now. A wee bit of guidance from the club at this stage might have been helpful. They've chosen to go another path in terms of how they handle their media in this aspect. I don't think that's helpful, because I think a lot of people are getting excited by some of the names, which I think are now at the point where they're not going to be the case. So I'm surprised that they went this route. I think they could have shaped the narrative a wee bit better than this, but that's the way that Rangers have decided to do it. It's the way that they decided to do their media operations for a wee while now. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Russell Martin's the other name that just won't go away. Again, a former Rangers player, but not from the most glorious of Ibrox eras. I could be completely wrong, as you say. Whoever they get could pay off in spades, but I just don't see either. I don't know. I just don't feel like he would survive in the kind of cauldron of Glasgow.
Listen, I think he's a great talker. In terms of from our point of view in the media. Listen, I don't think he's a guy that would leave us short for intros and headlines. Like you, I have doubts about his record, whether or not it's good enough to make him a candidate to be, a Rangers manager. I mean, I looked at his record last week. He's been in charge of 250 games as a manager. I think he's won something like 99 and lost 93. So it tells you that he's winning as many as he's losing almost. I think his goal difference over the piece, 250 games, is +5. For somebody who his whole reputation is building on this attacking brand of football, over 250 games, he's only 5 goals up. That doesn't strike me as somebody that is that just doesn't strike me as a good enough record to be Rangers manager, frankly. I mean, what was his record at, obviously I think he did well at MK Dons, but Swansea 15th, then 10th. Obviously then gets a job at Southampton, gets promoted, but is then out of a job 6 months later with Southampton on course for one of the worst ever records in Premier League history. So I think that's why, not just, I mean, I think there's an element that his own Rangers career, he's not remembered as a Rangers great by any stretch. 6 months, he took a 4-0 and a 5-0 scudding for Celtic. That is going to cloud a lot of people's judgment. I think, looking at him as a manager, I think there's plenty there to be concerned about. Listen, he certainly does play an attractive style of football, but whether or not it's effective or not, I think people will have concerns.
And just finally, Andy, before I let you go off back onto your Instagram hunt, Rangers pre-season plans have been put in place. What more can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so obviously they're going to kick off against Club Brugge on July the 6th. That'll be the first friendly. The team obviously reporting back to pre-season at Auchenhowie on June the 23rd, so they'll be back in for just about a fortnight. Then they play the first game against, say, Club Brugge, Clement's old side. That would have been a quite a nice one had Phil still been in charge. And then the day after that, or the week after that, week beginning July the 7th, the team's going to head to St George's Park, where the English FA, the English national teams are based. When they build up for big games, for big tournaments, £100 million facility. So you imagine that's going to have all the sort of home comforts that they're going to need to prepare for that. I think a few people will be surprised to see them staying, obviously in the UK, not travelling abroad. I know obviously I was with the team last year when they went to Holland, and as much as the facilities there were very good, I think there was concerns about the weather. I remember touching down in Amsterdam with an absolute torrential downpour with thunder, lightning and a wild storm. I think the initial thinking was that the team were going to go somewhere where they could be guaranteed properly nice, warm, dry weather. But given that they are now having to play these 3 Champions League qualifiers, or will it be Europa League, depending on how they get on, I think there's a concern amongst the sports science guys at the club about if they take them abroad, that's a 4th lengthy flight within a short space of time. So I think they decided just to stay in the UK, cut down on that sort of airtime, and hopefully, obviously, that will allow them to get through the 3 qualifiers without having to suffer too much disruption in terms of training with the flight time. And then so they'll be down there for a week. We think that the actual dates haven't been confirmed yet. And then there's a friendly on the 26th of July, which is the Saturday after the first leg of their Champions League qualifier, against Middlesbrough at home. So I think there'll be a few other games to be added in there, maybe one away, maybe some closed door ones as well, obviously. So, but that's the initial plans as they've been announced so far today.
Aye, and hopefully they'll have a manager in place for all of that. Fingers crossed.
We all hope so.
Andy, it's always a pleasure having you in the hotline. Thanks very much.
Andy Newport there, Keith. So there you go. I think everyone watching is well and truly been given a thorough Rangers update tonight.
Yeah, I think as well. I did notice a comment from Rebel, one of our regular contributors earlier, just pointing out that well done, Keith, for getting the Livingston prediction right last night.
She did
which,
say
which
that.
surprises me that you've not brought that up, Daniel, to be perfectly honest with you.
I did put it in the screen, but I thought, it didn't fit with what we were talking about at the time. That was a good call, though, because I think literally everyone else was saying Ross County.
Yeah, well, I couldn't see it. I just thought, I said it last night, when you get yourself into a sort of tailspin, as they have done, I've seen it happen before at Premier League clubs, they just can't dig themselves out of it. It looked actually last night as if they were going to get there, but they've collapsed, and it's been, I'm afraid, the story of the season.
Aye, and we've got 3 plastic pitches back in the Premiership next season now.
That's no great, is it?
Falkirk, Kelly and Livingston.
Yeah.
But hey-ho, there you go.
I think Falkirk's is meant to be a very, very good plastic pitch. There are different plastic pitches, different standards, different grades. I think Falkirk is one of the best ones. Livy's has been a problem, hasn't it? And I'm not sure what Kilmarnock says. Obviously, I think it'll just be the same because I think they've got one more
year,
season on it before they go to grass. So that's not a great look for the Scottish top flight, I've got to say. And another thing that if it is Davide Ancelotti, he's going to have to get to grips with that. What is this?
with Davide Martindale at the Tony Martindale.
David E. Martindale.
I think that more or less brings us to the end of Tuesday's Hotline Live with Record Sport. Thank you again for all the comments. They've been brilliant. If you want to get involved in the conversation, we'll be back to do it all again at 6 p.m. tomorrow. I hope you can join us then. Keith, it's always a pleasure.
Yeah, that was a long one tonight, Dan. Up the road, son. I've got some pasta to make.
Dinner time.
No, I'm going to show Gianni how to do it properly. That's all.
I think someone needs to be honest. Yep. Someone needs to. Thanks for watching at home. We'll be back tomorrow. Cheers.